I'd like to begin by thanking our last lecture series committee, a group of very hard-working individuals who take a moment of time here and there to meet with me and make decisions. I'd like to thank Dr. Edmondson, our dean, who continues to be supportive of this. And as always, I end this with a big heartfelt thanks to Sherry Hirsch, who makes it work. Trust me, this has gotten so much easier over the last 3 years, and it's all because of you, and I appreciate that very, very much. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Barbara Polnick, who is a professor in the Educational Leadership and Counseling Department at Sam Houston State. She holds an EDD in Educational Administration from Texas A&M University, a master's degree in reading along with principal and supervision certification from Sam Houston State. She has over 39 years of experience in public education as a teacher, Education Service Center specialist, instructional supervisor, assistant principal, and district curriculum director. Her current work in public schools includes evaluating programs, curriculum alignment, and organizational improvement consultant. During her 16 years at Sam Houston State, Dr. Polnick has conducted research and authored and co-authored over 70 articles, book chapters, edited books on women's issues and leadership, mathematics teaching and learning, women and girls in STEM, early childhood learning and gender, and classroom communities. She currently serves as co-editor of the Advancement of Women in Leadership online journal and is a reviewer for 9 journals. Dr. Polnick's scholarship and contributions also include over 65 international and national presentations and over $2.5 million in grants, where she has been the PI or the co-PI. She is also currently serving as an advisor for the Instructional Leadership Master's Program. Dr. Polnick has a leadership role in several local and national organizations, having served as president and vice president of the Sam Houston State Phi Delta Kappa chapter and past president of the Upsilon chapter of Delta Kappa Gamma, as well as past chair of the AERA SIG research on women in education. She has received numerous awards while at Sam Houston, including the SHSU College of Education Excellence and Service Award, a peer nominee for the SHSU College of Education Teaching Excellence and University Excellence in Service Awards. She is a past recipient of the Information Age Author Legacy Award, and most recently she was named 2015 Outstanding Alumni for the College of Education and Human Development at Texas A&M University. And she tap dances. And she sings. My earliest introduction to Barbara was at a Christmas gathering for PDK at Bobby Ezel's house where we went Christmas caroling. And I had the glorious pleasure of standing beside her, and I don't think I sang a lick. Listen to her. What an honorable professor for me to introduce to you for our last lecture series. Barbara?
Thank you, everyone, and that's why we're here, for the applause, of course. So, this is Randy Posh's book that's taken and developed from his last lecture, very famous last lecture, and he emphasized that he was not going to do an academic lecture. And many last lectures are academic last lectures, but rather he decided to present his journey that he had taken in terms of fulfilling his childhood dreams. And so in that same venue, I've chosen to frame my last lecture as more of a life's journey. And I sprinkled this with a few bits of wisdom along the way. And then, as I looked at what are the challenges that I experienced, I began to wonder, what, am I crazy? Because Randy Posh did his last lecture because he was dying of cancer. And so he wanted to make a final tribute and share his last words, his last wisdom. So I said to my son, I must be crazy. How am I going to compete with that? At which point he promptly reminded me, Oh, Mom, you've had a lot of bad things happen to you. So, no problem. Thank you for the positivity, Sean. There is another reason that I chose to give a non-academic lecture, and that has to do with my students that I teach, graduate students who have burst my bubble in thinking that I could ever go on a lecture circuit, especially in the spring this last year when I was, what I thought, delivering great words of wisdom, and they were laughing and talking about what a good time, and I said, oh, well, at least you're learning a lot, and they said, no, really, we just like you because you're funny. So forget that. So I knew then. And of course, most of the stories I share with them are funny because they're about school administration, and that is very, very funny. In fact, if you don't laugh, you will cry. So. Therefore, I don't apologize. I do apologize up front for this not being a theoretical perspective or anything, but I don't apologize for the fact that it's an application of real life. So, I hope you enjoy it. It is the intention of this whole lecture series that we're doing to share the challenges that professors have experienced over time and how they've met those challenges to meet their dreams. So in giving my last lecture, I reflected on what is the most meaningful things to share with you that's happened during my last 40 plus years of living, and I entitled it Aspirations, Inspirations, and Perspiration, Finding Alternative Routes to Fulfilling Your Dreams. And so it's my intent to take you on this journey in which I will share 7 turning points in my life that have caused me to make an adjustment, a bump in the road, surpass a hurdle, however you want to think about it, in order to achieve my dreams. And along the way, then I'll share the inspirations that motivated me to continue along this journey. You know, at first I was talking to Sean and I thought, you know, really I wanted to title this, Why Me, Lord? Because the more I thought about the tribulations and the trials, I thought, oh my God. And then he and I both agreed, but there's also an exclamation point at the end of that. Why me, Lord? How lucky am I to be here? I know that's not politically correct. I hope that's okay for the video. Okay. That cuts across our religions, I hope, except for the atheists and the agnostics. Okay, so anyway, so I'm sorry I'm having to use notes. Y'all, you know, the best of well-laid plans. So I spent hours learning how to do something brand new. Now, why would I try to do something brand new? I don't know, but I try to do something brand new where you embed your notes alongside the PowerPoint. And the audience can't see the notes. And you casually stand here and glance at the notes. And it looks like you're just thinking and you have memorized everything. Well, it doesn't work on this computer, so just, I don't know what to say. Okay. Oh, I do want to welcome everybody. In an effort to stack the house, I have coerced several people to sit here in the audience today. Family, colleagues, thank you. Friends, all of whom will probably respectfully just pretend that they're listening. I know them. This was not without bribes, though. My family, I had to bribe with farmhouse, where as soon as we get free, we're all going to farmhouse. Who knows? They will probably order everything on the menu, including the whole pies, which you know you can't beat. You know, my colleagues I bribed with adult beverages. They just look like they have thermoses and water here. Not true. And students, I don't know what I'm bribing you with, except... Yes, I do have colleagues who are willingly bringing you some treats, but I just hope that you enjoy it and you get something out of it. I know that when you look at us, I just know this because I was you, and I think I was looking at, no, I won't mention that, but anyway, some of the professors in this room I had, some have retired, some are still here, and I remember thinking, what do they know? They are so old. That's what I thought. I really did. So I know you think that. So just I hope you just get a little nugget of wisdom as you leave. These words up here, they'll mean something in a minute. I'm going to botch this up. Do I have any Comanches in the room? Oh, thank God. Okay. This is Ha Murahawahu. And any Swedish people? All right, well, that's Välkommen. And Japanese? Good. Yukoso. Very good. So anyway, that'll mean something in just about a minute. I can trace my heritage back to two great cultures that contributed to two turning points in my ancestral history, which I'm not counting in my 7 turning points. I just want you to know in case people are counting those, going, okay, she's only got 2 more to go. So these don't count. Now, when I use the term heritage, I'm referencing the practices, the characteristics that we reflect on as part of the culture aspect, the traditions that are passed down from generation to generation. And I believe we can learn from our heritage. In fact, I believe you can't learn about yourself without knowing about the generations who have gone before you. And so I selected to share 3. Well, we'll see. One is my Swedish grandmother. Now, this is actually a picture of her, and this is, you see the book? You probably can't read it because it's in Swedish. You'll know that because it has a lot of J's and A's in it. And then you can see another picture of how beautiful the flowers are. And they really believe in a lot of color in Sweden, lots of looking at color. I think it's because it's such a cold country. They're usually frozen most of the time. So any hint of spring is just splayed all over everything. But my grandmother, her name was Martha Eleanor Johansson, and she later married Ole Olsen. And so she came over from Sweden as an indentured servant, which was back then, it's not a negative thing, it just meant you didn't have enough money to pay for the passage for the ship. And so you worked somewhere until you paid it off. Well, she was fortunate enough to work in a home of some very wealthy people. So what she learned in becoming a maid, she learned to speak, she learned the proper clothing, she learned culture. So she learned a lot, even though she was what you would consider a lowly servant. Now, because my grandmother was in Sweden and trying to get over to America as quickly as she could, she tried very hard to book a passage, or book her passage on a ship that was sailing out of Sweden in 1912, but she missed it. And on that ship, about 1/3 of the passengers were Swedish at the time that it was in the Swedish port. Can you guess what ship that was? The Titanic. So if it hadn't have been for that, I wouldn't be here, my kids wouldn't be here, and probably some of you with your ancestry may not have been here. But anyway, now why I think it's so important for me to know about my grandmother and what I learned from her, other than the culture of Sweden, was the plight of immigrants. And then the other thing was that she had to learn a language. She spoke no English when she arrived. So and that's why she had to have, in more of a servant role. She could not speak English at all until she had been in the United States for about 2 years. And even then, for the rest of her life, she had such a brogue and such a dialect that she was thoroughly embarrassed. And so when they moved from Ohio, which was very Swedish community, to Texas, she hardly spoke to anyone at all in the neighborhood. This has given me a different respect for second language learners and the need to help people become and feel welcomed in the community. And so she was a very important person in my development. Another important person in my development had to do with the Comanche Indians. And this is because this is one thing that my father shared with me all the time. You are a descendant of Cynthia Ann Parker. That was my maiden name. She had red hair. She was captured by the Comanches. She was married to the chief of the Comanche, which at the time was Peta Nakona. Then she had and bore 3 children, one of whom became one of the most famous chiefs in the Comanche Nation, and that was Kawana Parker. And so 8 generations later, my father was telling me and kept telling me and showing me pictures all the time. Now, I thought this was a little offensive because when my son looks at this picture, he says, "Oh, Mom, I can see the resemblance." See, y'all get it, don't you? You get it. He didn't. He still doesn't get it. I'm thinking, Anyway, what I took away from my Native American heritage is that there's a great strength in leadership. Kawana Parker was very famous for trying to gather the tribes together, for helping them to become a peaceful solution and become one nation. And through that, I learned that there's also a great heritage in East Texas, because that's where Fort Parker was. That's where the mission, the Parkers were missionaries. They came, they established the fort. Cynthia Ann Parker was stolen from the fort and carried off as a young child. My earliest dreams were that of being an entertainer, a performer. You can see I was destined to be on the stage at an early age. And when I first learned to walk or talk, I memorized all these kinds of things. Nothing to do with what you might consider important information, but anything that was a song or a poem. And I did that so I could entertain. And so everywhere we went, they would put me out and I would read poems and sing songs. And so I knew that I was going to be a star. And my aunt tried to take me away from my parents, take me to Hollywood, and make me a star, which, as you can see from the photos, there was a lot of potential there. I took lessons in everything, every kind of dance, from the ages of 3 and 4. Turning point 1, polio. In 1954, 1 year before the Jonas Salk polio vaccine came into use, I was rushed to the Shriners Crippled Children's Hospital in Houston, placed in an iron lung, and then sent to a room with an oxygen tent, and later diagnosed with polio. Polio was also known as infantile paralysis. It was a very deadly disease. It was infectious, and it was a virus that affected the muscles and in the limbs. And so children who, or even adults who became infected with polio, suddenly their muscles became weak and they had an inability to move. Well, at that time that I contracted the virus, the best way of treating this disease was to brace the legs, or they even cast some children's legs. And by bracing the legs, they thought that would give you the ability to move, even if you had to use crutches or a wheelchair. What do you think happened when you brace the legs? They can't move, right? Muscle atrophy. So children's movements were limited, but you'll notice, do you see my braces when I'm on the horse there? See, my braces were bent. So that was kind of an awakening that they had. Well, maybe they could bend those braces so that children could walk and even run. Well, thank goodness for one person, Sister Elizabeth Kinney, which was an accredited nurse in Australia, discovered an approach to treating polio with hot packs and muscle rehabilitation. And eventually this led to what is known as physical therapy today. Now, she wasn't what was respected in the United States because she wasn't a registered nurse. She learned in the battlefields of the war. But her techniques were tried and true and eventually spread. Thank goodness for me, my mother, who was an RN, had learned about these techniques and started applying them as soon as she knew how to do it. And eventually, within 2 years, I no longer had to wear braces. I did, however, gain a big appreciation for what it's like to have a disability, what it's like to be different, what it's like for people to stare at you. Now, that part I don't think I minded too much. I really think I benefited from that, you know. In fact, my mother would say later in life, she would go, you know, not everybody's looking at you. And I go, my first thought, why not? Really, I'm telling you the truth. Is this the truth? This is my sister. She can vouch for everything I'm saying. So anyway, but I did look different. Even when the braces were removed, I had to wear orthopedic shoes forever up until I was 13 years old. And if you remember what it was like to be 13 and adolescent, shoes were everything. I love wearing flats because they're not orthopedic. I also like wearing heels, but I can't anymore because I'm old. So, anyway, second turning point, 14 schools in 12 years. My father was in the Air Force and we traveled a lot. We traveled schools every 2 or 3 years. And in that time, as you know, there are lots of challenges to saying goodbye to old friends and meeting new ones. So I am really good at meeting new friends. In case you're wondering, oh, Barbara never knows a stranger. Oh, look how she can make friends. I learned that over a lifetime of practice. Now, what am I not good at? Maintaining those friends after I'm gone. So I guess that's a part of a defense mechanism where you don't, as a child, you just say goodbye and you don't think about it anymore. So anyway, in these many, many different places where we traveled, I'm just going to name 3, which I think had a profound effect on my own development. Let's see. The first one, Japan. So I was moved with braces in the middle of first grade from a city of Houston school to a Tachikawa Air Force Base where I attended school, but we lived in the middle of a village. Now, this was the greatest blessing that could have ever happened. And as if any of you have ever traveled, and I know Bustamante has, I know Rick, I know many of you have. In fact, we're now traveling all over the place. thanks to, where are my people setting up travel abroad? Carla, who else? Patricia. Anyway, now we are exposing ourselves to more and more about the culture. But back then, this was in the middle of a village where nobody spoke English, and I didn't speak Japanese. But I learned to engage and talk and all kinds of things with girls, fellow girls. Now, there is a story that I'll share with you, but not on tape afterwards, something that my brother shared. Anyway, I gained an appreciation for a language and a culture that's very different from mine, and I learned that people who don't look like me and don't sound like me can become my very close friend, and we found common ground. And even though I did attend school on base, all the other development took place after school hours, including, you can see that little kimono there. I participated in many different festivals, dancing, again, performing. You got the theme? All right. Next place. When I was 9 years old, I moved from 4th grade. And in the middle of 4th grade, of course, it's always in the middle of the year, right? I never could figure that out. Why can't we just move at the end of the year? But in the middle of 4th grade, to Patrick Air Force Base, which is at the hub of Cape Canaveral, now known as Cape Kennedy. And that was at the height of the space movement, and that was in response to the space shuttle and all kinds of a flurry of all of us trying to beat and race to the top, race to space. Well, fortunately for me, I was in the middle of it. What that means is where we lived, the ground would shake. Things would fall off the mantle, and people would go running out of their houses hollering, missile, 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 and watch rocket ships, missiles, go fly into the air, and sometimes come back down. Now, these were unmanned, but eventually it led to the Manned Space Center. And that brought me a love of space and mathematics. So that's how I changed from becoming a performer and going to Hollywood, and now I was NASA bound. I share these things because I don't know if anybody else has found these journeys towards their career with these many bumps, but it happens for me. I did want to share one thing, though. Hopefully I can. Special education or gifted. You know, when you travel a lot, and every time you travel and you go to a new school, they give you a test. Well, I became really unenamored with diagnostic tests and achievement tests when I would be labeled special ed in one school and gifted in the next. Something told me right away that these were not good measures of what I knew and would be able to do. And so when Mr. Fogarty, my 5th grade math teacher, told my mother that he wanted to have a conference and she wanted to know what I had done, you know, and she just knew it was coming. Barbara talks too much. She's misbehaving. But anyway, and he said, I just wanted to tell you that Barbara's doing the best she can, but she will never be good at math. This was the wrong thing to say to me. Now, my mother, she went, oh, I know I'm not good at math either. You know, I'm going, whew. But anyway, for me, that was the catalyst, which later led for me teaching high school mathematics. Because that's the kind of thing that just spurs you to try harder and harder. At least it did for me. A third area in which, and I wanted to share this with Anthony because he has written stories and stories about this, but was we moved to Montgomery, Alabama. And this was in the early 60s. A lot was going on. Anthony can share this better than I can, but this probably had the most profound impact on me and my view of racism and my trying to understand why there was a difference. You see, I lived on bases. So really, the military was one of the most integrated types of organizations that we had in the U.S. And there was really the only differentiation in housing and that kind of thing were really class system of the NCO, non-commissioned officers, and the officers. Andrea can relate because her father was an officer. My father was NCO. So we had different kinds of housing. But other than that, I really didn't know. I didn't even know I was living in the projects. So basically, it was kind of like that. All the houses looked the same, no grass on the lawn, that kind of thing. But anyway, it was at this time that there was a lot of discussion around my table at home. And it really got hot when my mother, who, because she was a nurse, went to work in a hospital in Montgomery, Alabama, and became the private nurse to the wife of Governor Wallace. So lots of close conversations go on when you're the private nurse and someone's ill. Lots of conversations go on. And so my mother had a whole different perspective of this man who most of us in the paper recognized as a racist, as somebody who was throwing up, causing injustice, throwing up barriers to children being able to go, especially to universities and have access. But my mother shared a different side, which was the wife's side, the feminine side. So when conversations happened at home, it was very, very confusing. These discussions around the table then did impact me, and I really later realized that my work in social justice issues must have stemmed from this, from wanting to understand, really wanting to understand this. Perhaps the greatest influence of all on my emotional and social and later academic development was my mother and my aunt. And both of these women were very active in the World War II efforts, especially in fields that were traditionally male issues. These are not my mother and my aunt, but they are prototypes. Because if you'll look on the right-hand side, that's Rosie the Riveter. Rosie is this was the typical, do they know about Rosie the Riveter?
Don't ask me, I'm not a history teacher.
Okay, and Wendy the welder. So my mother and my aunt were both welders and riveters. They would go to the Houston Ship Channel and weld on those big, huge battleships. And my mother told me many stories about how she said it really wasn't, it was a man's job, but it was easy for us because we were light, we were easy to lift, we were very agile with those torches. We could do the welding that some of the men couldn't do. And there was jealousy and there was some hostility, and they learned to live with that. And then also in Corpus Christi, that's when the planes came in, and they needed riveters who would go in and rivet those different pieces of metal back on the planes. So both of these women shared these wondrous tales about men's work and how women could do it. And this described this challenge that I faced in a majority male world, and they faced a majority male world, because to tell you the truth, at the top in educational administration when I first came here at Sam Houston State University, there were mostly men. And in fact, at Texas A&M, where I got my doctorate, I never had a female professor, not one. I didn't even know they let them in until I got to teach one class for Dr. John Hoyle, who never lets anybody teach his class, and I got to teach one class in the summer, and that kind of gave me the fight to go forward. But these values influenced my research and my study, my publications, and my work with students. This is Kenesha Wiley. She received an Outstanding Dissertation Award for her work on female principals and the challenges that they face in getting to the top. Oh, high school female principals, which is another whole issue. Turning point number 4, finding my career path. Maybe. I was fortunate to have the influence of several teachers along my 14 schools, but mostly the ones that kind of surfaced that I remember the most were in junior high and high school, and they were my music teachers. And I guess you might say that, you know, when you travel from state to state, town to town, you kind of cling to something where you can work with other people, and choir was one of those places. So even though I would have to change, like if I signed up for Latin, I had to change and take typing, but music was always there. Choir was always there. So music was a way, it's kind of like a universal language where you can learn to communicate across the board with people. Well, my music teachers were the ones who were inspiring me. So remember I was going to NASA, right? Remember that? Okay, well, I changed my mind. Because my junior high teacher said, you really should go down to Pasadena Little Theater and audition for a show. And I was thrilled. In fact, I thought she thought I was going to get the lead. Now, mind you, flat. Hope that didn't come out on the tape, but 13, skinny, and no figure, best way I can describe it. And I went down with my little song sheet. Now, my mother was really great, but she didn't know anything about music, and she didn't know how to encourage me. I had to do everything on my own. Music teachers picked me up from home and I had to learn the music by myself. I learned to play the piano a little bit and trying to just work out the notes. So I wasn't really very good at auditioning, but I thought I was, really. And so when I sung my song, you know, I took my bow, and I couldn't wait for them to tell me I got the part of Fiona. But I didn't get the part of Fiona. They gave it to some college woman. So then I learned, you may be good, but there's a lot to this theater business that you have to learn. And so as I progressed through high school, in my fourth high school, the fourth high school that I went to, I found a music choir teacher who really encouraged me to keep going. And he was the one who took me to concerts where I really learned what real singing was. And he would take me in the neighborhood in Victoria, and he would say, now this is an opera concert we're going. You're gonna hear an aria. You're gonna hear all these different kinds of instruments. So he took me where my parents could not. He took me to these different situations where I learned what real singing was, which inspired me then to learn more and take lessons and then become what eventually, no way yet. Okay. So he got me a scholarship, a college scholarship, and that inspired me to go on and become a Broadway star. But turning point number 5, physical challenges reappeared. Goodbye music, hello math, maybe. So what happened, I was in a car accident. In the car accident, I went through the windshield and had numerous injuries, one of which was a collapsed lung, pneumothorax, fancy word for it. At which point, I didn't heal very well. So I wasn't able to continue my fantastic career in opera, or well, I just knew I was going to be a star, right? So then I thought, okay, what else can I do that looks pretty easy? And I thought math looked pretty good, and it looked pretty easy. So I majored in math. All was well, except, oh, by the way, I wanted to major in math so that I could be at NASA. So back on that track. Got it back? Space Center. Okay, something went wrong. A little bump in the road. NASA was doing closures. Now, I did have a friend, a best friend, who was a math major with me at University of Houston, and she said she was going to go and become a computer systems analyst. And I said, this should never listen to me. I have no foresight. I said, computers, what a dead-end job. That was my perspective, because all I could see was how we had to fill out those stupid punch cards and sit in a room, and it just looked like the most boring thing you could ever imagine. Sorry, IT. But she went off and, of course, became very wealthy as a systems analyst, and I didn't go to NASA. However, change routes, rerouting. Do y'all have that ominous sound on your phones? Well, that's what this reminded me of. So I had to change routes. I had to change my way of thinking, and I took 2 part-time jobs. I was a little frustrated at the time. One of those was being a dancing teacher. Well, I had taken so much dancing for therapy that I pretty much had that down. And the other was working in a daycare center teaching kindergarten kids. And that is where I learned, oh my gosh, I love teaching. This is the most phenomenal thing. And it's there that I learned no more NASA, no more Broadway star. Teaching was what I wanted to do. So back to school, finding my passion again. When I first, I do need to tell you that when I first applied for my first teaching job, this is for all of you education majors, I wanted kindergarten, and they didn't have any openings in kindergarten. And so but they did look at my resume, and they said, we're sending you over to the high school principal. And I said, high school principal? Why are you sending me to the high school principal? And they said, well, he'll tell you about it when you get there. So when I got there, he looks at me, and I was kind of thin then, so I looked pretty good. And he said to me, hey, I see you've got some dancing here. I said, yes, sir. And he said, it's not what I majored in, though. I just teach it. Uh-huh. Well, I need a drill team director, and I need one right away. What else could you teach? And I said, math, because, right, I majored in it, so I thought it was pretty good. So, back to school, this time, changing routes, I went back as a Bearcat bound. At which point, I found some wonderful people who helped me out. Dr. Sullivan, sitting right there, and Dr. Henderson were both my professors when I was getting my secondary teaching certificate. And so they just were so great about, okay, you can get this done, you can get this done. I didn't have to take any more math. I had to take 4 courses in English. I don't even remember who those people were. Are there any English professors? So sorry. Well, it's a good thing I took those 4 graduate level courses, because then I ended up having to write, right? And you can't just do math problems, and be a professor. So it was a good thing I took those. But anyway, Bearcat bound. I then later came back to graduate school, divorced, and came back to graduate school. And I really have to thank Dr. Tom Murray, who's no longer with us, for introducing me to my husband, and Jack Staggs for putting up with us, because we were both in the same class in psychology of learning. And I don't know if you know Dr. Jack Staggs, but he's a very serious guy. And he would look at both of us and went, I don't know how you're learning anything. You guys can't take your eyes off of each other. And he would say that quite often. And Dr. Jimmy Merchant for my principal internship. And by the way, I have to share one thing. This is for you guys. You guys probably don't need to learn this, but for you. Be careful what you write in your journals and logs and Facebook. So in that principal course, they had us keep track of 100 hours of logs. Does this sound familiar? We haven't changed. We still do it. But anyway, and so I didn't believe that Dr. Merchant, who was my teacher, really read those things. So I started just writing all kinds of stuff. Drinking wine, enjoying a movie. I just scattered my stuff all the way throughout there, because I really didn't think he was reading them. And he did read them. He read every note of the 100 hours. And you would think, okay, it's all over. I messed up with this one professor. I'll never see him again. But guess what? Guess who was on the interview committee when I applied for a job at SAM in ed leadership? There he was, and he remembered. He called me by name and said, "Weren't you the one who wrote in your..." And I just went, oh God, I'm not going to get this job, I'm not going to get this job. But I do have to thank a couple of other people, and that was Dr. Genevieve Brown, taught me our very first curriculum class, and allowed me to be a guest lecturer, which really, really hooked me. But I did want to share that about the... See, turning point 7, we're almost there, right? Everybody's going, God, will she ever shut up? All right, turning point 7. Who knows? I totally lost it. Oh, okay. When I got my doctorate from Texas A&M, I don't think I've ever would have gotten it, except for they came to Conroe ISD and said, we want a cohort of principals and we're willing to come to you. Because we for sure weren't going to drive an hour and a half to College Station to class. And Sam Houston didn't have a program yet. It hadn't been approved yet. And so I learned from a great group of guys, all guys, that I could become a professor. And it was about that time that I began to see, you know what? This is something that I want to pursue. I want to write. I want to research. I want to do a lot of things. But there was this dilemma, and this dilemma had to do with, woohoo, not yet. This dilemma had to do with the difference in public school salary and teaching at higher ed. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but I know when you go out and you become a teacher, you're not going to make anything. But if you're going to be a professor, you're going to make even less. Just telling you, starting out. Now, you can hang around like the rest of us who've been here 17 years, and by then you've accumulated a few bucks. But at first, you don't make anything. So we really had to work on our skills financially to make sure that we could achieve this dream when dreams collide. So the dreams colliding is the fact that I had to make a big decision. Do I leave administration where I'm successful, where I'm making lots of money, where they like me, or do I go to a brand new place where I don't really know how I'm going to fit in? Well, I do want to tell you, because some of you know this, that I really enjoy performing even to this day. And so I've taken a lot of classes. These are just some shots of me on stage. I thought you would enjoy them. Are y'all leaving? I was just about to sing. Oh, okay. So, just kidding. I'm sorry to tease you. But anyway, my point in bringing this up is that if you have a passion for something like I did, you can keep that going through a hobby. You can make friends and communicate with folks who have a similar interest as you, whether it's backpacking or fishing or whatever. And that, I almost did it. I almost knocked that water over. But anyway, that's what I encourage you to do, is to get that hobby. Maybe you won't be a Broadway star, but you know what? I've had a leading role in over 35 musicals and plays. And I've performed to audiences anywhere between 5 to 300. And so I figure I've gotten a lot of that out of my system. And even though, and I just tell you this, even though I had to have a hip replacement, a knee surgery, and thought I will never dance again, I took the taps off all of my shoes. I hung them up. I said, that's okay, I'll wear character shoes. I'll be in the chorus. Which is, but I'll just be in the chorus. And then I got this phone call from somebody who said, do you mind coming and audition? We're doing a tap dancing show. And I said, no, I can't do that anymore. And they said, are you sure? And I said, well, I'm assuming I can't do it anymore. And they said, why don't you come on down? And I said, I don't know, how good are the people auditioning? And they went, why don't you come on down? And I said, okay, but I don't have any tap shoes. I mean, I have character shoes, but I don't have any tap shoes. And so I auditioned for a tap dancing show, and it went like this. I won't show you how to dance, but it went like this. I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1, and 2, and 3. That's what happens. The brain doesn't know you can't do something. It's still there. It's muscle memory, and you can sometimes accomplish those dreams. So I wanted to share that. In addition, I have had the opportunity to sing with 2 performing groups that have been lifelong friends, a madrigal group at the Texas Renaissance Festival for over 20 years. We don't sing there anymore. We're all old. And a Broadway singing group, which we stayed together for about 17 years. And you'll see Gary Hood in the picture there. Yeah, he showed up. Too. He's not in there? Oh, dang, I thought I got a Gary Hood picture. Don't tell him. Y'all, please don't tell him. He would be totally offended. And so just remember that no one achieves their dreams alone. You need help. You need support. For me, it's my friends, my community, and also my family. They're my support system. I have my daughter here, my son, no, my husband, Gene, my son, Sean, and my sister, Deanne. And I begged them to come, and they said, sure, we'll come. We'll take a day off. We would love to not have to teach those 10 and 12-year-olds for a whole day. So there they are. And I'm giving you some closing thoughts, and here are my closing thoughts. So make the most of the bumps in the road. Learn how they can inspire you to find maybe a different path for fulfilling your dreams. Your dreams may have to change just a little, but maybe you can find that different path. Second, stay positive and open to all these new avenues. Even though something seems like, oh my gosh, a car accident, I'll never perform again. I've got a collapsed lung. Well, what comes out of that? A new career. I would have never been a teacher. I would have never been here had that not happened. Be brave and don't be afraid to tackle a challenge. And remember, you're as strong as your support system. So seek help from others. And lastly, when external forces alter your plans, focus on your inner strength. So I thank you very much for being so attentive. Appreciate it.